That is the one thing that AI can't replace.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Housing Insiders, the podcast for founders, builders, lenders, and regulators, and anyone who believes, like we do, that everyone should be well housed. I'm Jonathan Lawless.
And I'm Jeremy Potter. On Housing Insiders, we're hosting the conversations you won't hear anywhere else about how to make housing more innovative and attainable.
And we're super happy to partner again with Built Rewards to bring you these smart conversations. If you're not following what Built is doing in the housing industry, highly recommend that you kind of tune in a little bit and see how I think Built is really going to transform the industry. But in the meantime, if you have an idea for a guest or a show or would be interested in being a partner to sponsor an episode, please email us at podcast@thehousinginsiders.com.
Yes, we love to hear from you. We want to hear about more topics that are interesting to you. If you like the show, if you give us a review, if you spread the word, that means we can get those topics and new podcast episodes out to you.
All right. Every episode, I think I say we have an amazing guest, the best of all possible guests, and I really mean it this time. We have a friend, somebody whose company I actually was an early investor in because I think he's doing so well. It's Josh Jensen. He's the CEO and co-founder of Inspectify. We'll hear all about it, but they are really transforming what gets done in terms of inspections and valuation, underwriting, everything that has to do with property and real estate. He is recognized as a thought leader in housing innovation, has a background in engineering from a little school called MIT. No stranger to venture-backed startups. He was with the Andreessen-backed Fly Homes, which is an incredible company. So super knowledgeable. Josh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. And man, not to live up to that intro. That was an amazing intro.
We set high expectations here,
I like
Josh,
the
but we
bars low
know.
and I can easily clear it, but now I've got to try really hard.
Well, maybe we'll start with what John just mentioned, which is, you were at Fly Homes. Fly Homes is still a mover, a player in the market with their products and solutions. And then you said, I got to start Inspectify. And we're just curious, like, what did you see? What led you to make that move? What is it that caused you to want to build out Inspectify to where you are today?
Yeah, so I was fairly early on at Fly Homes. I think I was employee 8 or 9. And for those that aren't familiar with the Fly Homes model, at the time, Fly Homes was creating a lot of financial products, financial engineering, if you will, that would help unlock liquidity within the real estate transaction. And the core product that we were scaling while I was there was their cash offer product. And for those that aren't as familiar with that, effectively it removes the kind of unfair advantage that investors have in the market where they can make an all cash offer, whereas traditional home buyers like us have to get a mortgage because we don't have infinite capital, and sellers will go with the cash offer because it's less friction, right? So Fly Homes at the time had a $100 million line of debt or credit through Goldman Sachs, where we would make an offer in cash for a house, buy it, and then once the traditional home buyer got their financing in order, we would transfer it over to them, and effectively making them an all cash buyer. And as you can imagine, like, we had two customers for diligence on that process, right? Like we were doing inspections and underwriting and valuations for both the first time home buyer, which is much more qualitative, emotional almost in nature, right? Is this the right home for me? This is the single largest purchase I'm ever going to make in my life, like a lot of high stakes. And then Goldman Sachs, which this is a rounding error in their balance sheet, right? This is a quant heavy risk or no risk, right? And what we learned pretty early on is the underlying data that both parties needed was effectively the same, right? It just had to be presented and communicated in a different way. And therein line, the problem is because inspections and multiple forms of diligence are heavily fragmented, heavily unstandardized, both in terms of supply that's doing the work, as well as the different software tools that they use. Like we had a massive amount of people that was just managing that process, right? I think for a company that was doing 100 real estate purchases a month, I had 5 people helping me just manage inspections, right? And so their line, like the main motivation to start the business, and it's not unique to me, it's like most entrepreneurs, it started from a pain point that I felt firsthand, which is doing inspections at scale sucks, right? And like if this small little upstart Fly Homes is feeling this pain point, there's got to be a lot of enterprise brands that they probably just have entire departments that are focused on this. And so, yeah, that was the urge to start. I quit my job in June 2019, which seems like forever ago, and went off and started building Inspectify.
Josh, when you told me about the idea, I mean, it was like it was one of those ideas. I was like, God, that's such an obvious thing to do, and yet nobody has done it. And we've been digitizing every aspect of the mortgage process we can think of, but one that's so important to home buyers is the inspection part. And I remember getting my first inspection, which was like a 40-page, Tableau side PDF, and it was, obviously highly valuable for me to know what I was buying, but still not in a format that was at all useful. So it's just a really interesting opportunity that you've taken advantage of. Can you give us a sense of like what the inspection market looks like? Who gets inspections? How often do they get inspections done? Like what did that market look like as you were sort of
Mhm.
approaching a way to like really transform it?
Yeah, and let me actually answer a comment on what you said earlier because I think it ties into that, which is you're right in the sense that like think about the real estate transaction, like there hasn't been a lot of innovation on the inspection. And the main reason being, it's actually quite simple. Like it's the smallest amount of money you make, like a servicer makes on the transaction, right? Think about all the people that get a cut when a home is purchased, the brokerages, the agents, the mortgage lender, the title escrow company, the insurance company, the appraiser, even like the inspector is the bottom of the barrel, right? So like there's just not a lot of money to be made doing inspections, and like capitalism speaks, like people just aren't investing in those businesses. There's less money to be made than versus solving mortgage or solving brokerage, right? And when we started the company, we're a venture backed business, like we kind of had that perception as well. It's like, man, like the total home inspection industry for doing consumer purchases, it's like a $3 to $4 billion TAM, which might seem like that's a big number, but that's pretty tiny compared to like a lot of other segments. And so our way of about sizing up is like, whoa, like, well, the data is the value in this business is actually the data, right? Like if I can capture that data, there's a lot of other businesses I can generate. And fundamentally, that is still true. But what I've learned over the last 3 to 4 years is the overall size of the market for inspections, which I'll define that in a second, is actually closer to 30 to $40 billion. Like the consumer home inspection when you buy a house is by far the smallest portion of that business, right? And if you think about it, like think about a typical real estate asset, right? A single family home, right? I characterize that home, it lives in one of three stages over its life cycle, right? The first one is it's the transaction, right? It's being bought and sold. The second one is it's being used, so owned or operated either as a primary residence or as an investment property. And the third one is it's being improved or developed, right? So that's either infill, new construction, or fix and flip, retrofit, right? If you think about those three stages, it spends the least amount of time in the transaction by far, right? That's just a snippet of time it's doing. We're spending a lot more time in operation, execution, and development retrofitting. And that's where the vast majority of inspection exists over that life cycle, right? And so getting back to your question, right? If you think about the real estate transaction, right? The folks that need inspections, it's people like you and me, it's consumers, it's both buyers and sellers. What we're seeing as a really interesting trend and that I'm excited about is more and more sellers are doing diligence up front, right? They're doing the inspection up front to be able to disclose that to all buyers, which creates a far more efficient transaction. But needless to say of that, like you have buyers and sellers that are doing inspections. You have investors that are, looking at properties and doing inspections. But by and large, the vast majority of the industry is outside the real estate transaction, right? In those other stages, and those are the where a lot of the TAM actually is of the
Yeah, you
business.
just mentioned something that I think cuts at how we can talk about both the inspection market that John asked about and what does the future of this look like. And that is the people most interested or in most need of an inspection are the least likely to get one, it sounds like. Is what you're saying. If I'm an asset holder, if I'm an asset manager, if this is something where I'm making investments according to that schedule or that return, then I need to know. I need to know about my asset, and that's how I'm treating it. And if it's a buyer or a seller, I'm in that stage of transaction of the thing I've either been using or plan to use, this like highly emotional moment. We're not on psychology insiders, we're on housing insiders. So we don't need to go too far into buyers and sellers. But I know that too many buyers, excuse me, pass on the inspection, don't get it. They're the ones that need it. Yet it's Wall Street, other investors, fix and flip investors, and real estate brokers who are getting it. Can you talk a little bit about that split and if you're seeing any changes to that split?
Yeah, it comes down to like one fundamental reason, which is Wall Street doesn't have emotion. It's that simple, right? If they lose 123 Main Street, they will go buy 124. versus like when you bought your house, like that was the house. It had the cabinets you wanted. It had the neighborhood you wanted. It was like two houses down from your friends, right? So like the opportunity costs of missing that home was significant, right? And so it goes back to like, okay, how do I increase my chances of winning that house no matter what, right? Well, the number one thing is like one price, obviously, like whoever's going to pay the most will generally get the home. But long story short, I mean, like well beyond that, it's also the contingencies, right? So like if you can make a clean offer, I'll put that in quotations, that is a, at purchase price with no contingencies closed in 2 weeks, like you're going to win that deal, even if another offer is 10% more or 5% more and has all these contingencies, right? I think that's the main reason why Wall Street can and investors, I don't want to call it Wall Street because I also want to call it the stigma that Wall Street actually does not own that many single family homes. It's mostly I'm more of the problem. I own rental properties. I'm the real problem. So people should hate me versus Wall Street. But when we buy investment properties, like I buy based upon return. I don't buy based upon emotion, right? And that's just unfortunately like a constraint of when you're buying a house versus an investment, right? You're buying a home, you're buying something that has emotional attachment to that is an unfortunate unfair advantage. Again, chalk that in other categories, unfair advantages for first time home
We
buyers and
can now
traditional
call this
buyers.
the Taylor Swift problem. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Because whereas you were talking about owning the rental properties, I have the story of being the first time home buyer who did waive the inspection on my very first home and had all of the predictable problems that came after that because I had done that. So it's a topic near and dear to my heart for sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I mean, so we'll talk a little bit about the consumer market for a second here. The people who are getting an inspection as they're going in, hopefully, and if not, they're going to most often regret it. But the thing that I've seen a lot of, there's these new companies that have been coming out that have helped people understand their property on an ongoing basis, right? So as you said, the transaction is a moment in time, and maybe the inspection is good to make me aware of what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. But the question is like, how do I manage my house in the long term? And over time, you're sort of accruing this unknown liability. Like I just think to myself, like, I have no idea when my HVAC is going to go bad. I have no idea if my foundation's good anymore. Like there are all these things that I literally have no idea of until something terrible happens. And so
Mhm.
just with that in mind, and these companies that are trying to do things that are on a more ongoing basis, is there a role that you're seeing that inspections are being done more frequently by owners, like the tradition, not investor owners, but like primary owners of a home? Is that something that could be encouraged more frequently?
Yeah, it's funny. So going back in history a bit. So before I joined Fly Homes, I started a company called Madre Homes, and the whole premise of Madre was to encourage homeowners to do an annual inspection, right? And this, I don't want to act like this was profoundly my idea. Idea has been around for generations, to be candid. But the classic comparison is like if you own a car, you're getting an inspection of that car at some frequency. If you're over the age of 30, you're probably getting an annual physical, or age of 40 at some frequency, hopefully on an annual basis, right? But we do this for ourselves, we do this for our cars and other assets, but the single most valuable asset we own, we don't at all, right? We just do not rely on any additional data. And so like my whole premise is like, can I change that? And what I realized is that's actually pretty hard to change with just an inspection, right? And the reason being is, I mean, it's human nature. We don't see the value in having preventive maintenance and prevent and insight until it's way too late, right? Like you don't realize that you should actually inspect your HVAC at some frequency until your HVAC blows up, and now you've got to drop $25,000, and you're getting grilled by the contractor because it's November and he or she has plenty of other work to do, right? We've all heard those stories. We may have been in those situations, but like at that point, like it's too late. You've already kind of missed the boat. And so, the way that we think about, I think about it now that I'd say I'm a bit more educated. I've failed once with one company trying to do it. Is there is definitely a world where inspections can help change that dynamic, right? But it can't be the only product. You can't go to homeowners and sell them, I'm going to tell you what's wrong with your home and how and when you should fix it, right? Like that's not enough at all. We're busy folks, and we either have jobs or families or other activities going on. Like we don't have time to log into a portal on a daily basis, even weekly basis, even monthly basis to be told how to manage our home. That's just not how folks operate. And so, the way that I think about it now is I think the solution lands within a couple different areas. One is there's definitely a persona of a home buyer that's just an easy button, just like charge me a fixed amount at a month, at a year, whatever it might be, and just take care of it for me, right? And it's a subscription based model, and I think you see a lot of businesses like have tested that and have had some success. But I think the reality is like that only works for a certain persona of homeowner. That's not every homeowner. It's definitely not me, for example, right? Like, and I'm probably minority, and I'm a weird minority at best, where I like working on my house, right? I'm a DIYer. Like, I want to fix it myself, but I could definitely have some type of agent tell me when I should be doing things, right? Because I don't have that capacity in my brain. But I like working my house. I don't want to hit an easy button just to overpay for people to do the work. But there is definitely a module that you can be more intentional on when to take action in your home. I think the second part is or second area, which is similar to the first but a little bit different, is more of like a financial product. It's almost like an insurance product where it's like maybe I'm not paying somebody to do the work, but I'm going to pay a bit more upfront to be able to just give me peace of mind down the road. So again, it's more like a financial, like an insurance product than a service contract, in my opinion. But like it's another way for folks to offshore the risk. But I think both those products become far exponentially more impactful, exponentially more value added, either based upon a lower price or more service if you fundamentally know the home you're underwriting, right? So that's where the inspection comes in. If you actually know what's in the home, you can offer a far better product than anybody else. We've spent a lot of time in the warranty space, and we built kind of a unique warranty on the inspection side. And it's always blows me away that like most home warranty companies don't know what's in the home that they're underwriting. Right? They have no like their packages are based upon like silver, gold, or platinum or bronze, right? Which just increases the coverage. It's has nothing to do with the actuarial risk in the home at all, which just blows my mind. But like I think that's where the opportunity is. If you have cleaner data on the asset, you can underwrite better, you can offer a better product for the end consumer, knowing that it's not a silver bullet. Every homeowner is different. And you've got to think about the different personas and build a product around that.
I think that's a perfect way to frame up the tension here and the market dynamics. And it sounds like one of the market dynamics is not just getting some attention paid to this problem, which is we have aging assets and we have assets that are changing for all these different reasons, but it's also like how you address it and with who. Have you seen? Because one of the things I think about when I think about addressing the HVAC and the different issues that you mentioned is like, who do I trust? Who do I go to? Who's going to show up? And that continues to be a problem in a lot of different markets. And it continues to be a problem we talk about a lot with talent in terms of residential contractors and home builders, like talent of the trades. But I think it's also true of a lot of these home management, home ownership aspects as well. What are you seeing in terms of the home inspector expertise? What is it about that can help inform of where we should have more attention or more competition or more dynamics here? We also need more people doing those types of things to create the environment that you talked about. What are some of the trends you're seeing with that?
The actual act of doing the repair or improvement on a home, I think it's one of the hardest problems to solve it's actually far harder than inspections. There's a reason why I did inspections versus repairs. It's so much easier to do inspections. So I took the path of least resistance. But yeah, I will tell you like one fundamental truth, in my opinion, right? Any business model that's trying to help the homeowner manage their home or some capacity on that, if that business model generates revenue from the contractor, it's going to fail. I guarantee that, right? And it comes down to one very simple premise. Your best contractors don't need more business at all. And so like if they're paying to get the business, you're going to get the worst contractors. And I didn't mention some in my background, but like I do a lot of real estate development. So like my wife and I've developed probably 30, 40 homes over the last 15 years. So, like I've shared my fair amount of time with contractors. And the ones that you find on I'm not going to mention names, so the various like lead gen sites, whatever my value, like they're the ones that like there's typical two personas. You can have really good experience if you get a young, hungry guy or gal that's trying to grow their business, right? They're going to do a great job, but like they're not going to stay on that platform very long. So if you can like hit the right time period where like they're starting their business, they get you and you have a great experience, great, right? The ones that have been there a long time, like that's the only like if they were doing a good job, they'd get more repeat business from people they're getting from that website, right? So I don't know, like I sort of like you have to disconnect that where to me, I believe the right model is one where the contractor doesn't pay anything, but they're allowed to stay on the platform if they deliver a good experience, right? So that means the business has to think of a different business model to make money. But like again, making it out the contractor, I don't think is ever going to work at all, right? How to answer your question, how like inspections can fit in that, and it'll probably be an overarching trend that I will say over and over over this podcast is like the value is going to be in the data, right? So one thing I didn't mention about the origin, I told about the pain point of Inspectify or of Fly Homes and why I started the business, but I'd say the initial kind of aha of Inspectify came when I bought my first house back in 2011. And you guys probably know this better than I do. Like the real estate transaction really hasn't changed at all since 2011. It's basically the same thing. Like trillions of dollars of innovation have been invested in it. It's literally the same thing. And so my first house, I found my home inspector through how most people find their home inspectors. They're trusted real estate agent, right? So real estate agent booked the inspection, home inspector came to the home and spent a couple hours there. A day later, he gave me this binder that was literally like the Bible of my home. But it was this like incredible data set of my property, but it was extremely analogous in nature, right? Like there was no utility in that besides this like point in time I'm buying this home because it's so hard to connect it to other systems. And so I was like, oh, this data set's really interesting. And then a week later, my lender, which was Wells Fargo at the time, sent out an appraiser that captured a very similar data set that was in that 3-ring binder. And then I closed in the home and USAA, my insurance carrier, sent out another inspector that captured data that was in that 3-ring binder. And then I started renovating the home. This goes back to your question. And I had contractors and maintenance folks come through, and they captured a very similar data set that was in that binder to do their work. And I was like, man, if you could just find a way to like create the plumbing to connect all this, there's like so much efficiency you can drive through all of that. And I think that's how it ties into your comment on the contractors is like to keep the best contractors on your platform. One, you can't charge them, and two, you should try to make their job easier, right? You want them to keep coming back and deliver an amazing experience to your end customers. And so like if you can leverage that data to help them price, quote, manage their workflow, like classic overuse example, like you're servicing that forced air furnace and we know what size the filter is. Cool. He can put it in his text truck before he leaves and just do the work while he's there as opposed to doing multiple visits. Like those are the things that I think can drive more efficiency and efficacy for the contractor, make their job easier and incentivize them to stay on these types of platforms so homeowners keep getting the best and not the bottom of the barrel of folks that are just looking for a quick buck.
Josh, you've already said so many brilliant things, like all the way back to like sellers doing inspection before they sell, do the warranty product. I guess the one thing that we haven't really talked about is actually what Inspectify does. So maybe take a couple seconds to kind of walk us through, like, who are your end customers? What does the product do? And then we'll talk, like you said, a ton about like the other ways you can use the data, like the warranty products. So we'll come back to that. But like, what is that data? Where does it go? How is it stored? So anyway, give us the sort of nuts and bolts of Inspectify.
It's funny. It's evolved a lot. I usually have the same elevator pitch that doesn't evolve too much, but we've made a bunch of changes to our product the last like 8 months. So like it's fundamentally changed that I'm testing out a new elevator pitch,
All
so you
right.
guys can critique me on how bad my elevator pitch is. So I tell folks that Inspectify is creating the data layer that drives efficiency over the workflows of residential real estate. It's kind of my one liner. I'll compare and contrast that to my old elevator pitch so you guys have a benchmark. My old elevator pitch was Inspectify is a vertically integrated property inspection underwriting platform, right? And the reason for the difference now, it's mainly because we're doing more than just inspections now. When we started the business 6 years ago, we grew from doing very little inspections to doing a lot of inspections on a monthly basis. But in the day, that was still just doing inspections, right? That was like the core product. But over the last 8 to 12 months, one, we acquired a appraisal technology company. So now we're actually doing valuation work on top of inspections. We've also built out software that helps our end clients take that proprietary inspection data set and turn it into cost to cure, cost to renovate, cost to repair. And really that comes back to like where we think the business is going is like once we've done the inspection, and what I define as an inspection, I said it before, and I never actually got to the definition. I define inspection as any act that captures data on a property. That is my definition of an inspection. So that could be a 4-hour literally no rock unturned inspection, or it could be a exterior drive-by taking 5 photos from the curb. Those are both inspections with Zillow capturing data on the home, right? And kind of our view of where we're going is like once you have that data set, once you've done that inspection, like there's all these other workflows that we can help make more efficient and more effective by having that data and building software around it. And so like appraisals is a great example, right? Like selfishly, the reason why we acquired this appraisal technology company is like one of the most common things you do after an inspection, you do an appraisal, right? So if I already have the data, I can feed that data into my own appraisal software and automate most of that workflow and help our clients save time, save money, and even get a better output, right? And that is a theme that we're continuing to rinse and repeat as we look for other workflows that we can drive efficiency on. But it all kind of starts with our where we started, which is capturing the data, do the inspection. I can talk a bit about how we do that if that's helpful, because I know I completely skirted your question, but I want to take the opportunity to test my new elevator
No, that
pitch.
was the
Well,
answer. It sounded the
yeah.
answer to me. Yeah, I was gonna say.
Well, the only other thing I asked that you did skirt a little bit was like who your end customer is. Like, who are you selling to? Who are you distributing through? And like, what's that look like?
Yeah, it's funny. So when we and I'd say like I had this foresight and like vision years ago, and I didn't. So I'd just be lying to you to say I did. In mid 2022, before interest rates went like this, 95% of my customer base was around the real estate transaction. And it usually took the form of a prop tech company like a Fly Homes or Homeward or Homelight, other folks that are in that space, iBuyers, like an Open Door, an OfferPad, or it took the form of like real estate investors, right? So going back to the point made earlier, like folks that were doing the inspections around the purchase were our main customer sets. I will make the nuanced point that our core customer, even to today, is still enterprise. You can go to inspectify.com and book a home inspection. Yes. And people do it every single day. But like going back to my point earlier, saying the real estate transaction hasn't changed since I bought my first house. Most consumers are not going online to book their home inspection. They are still relying on their real estate agent to book their home inspection. And there are things that are okay with that and things that are fundamentally flawed, but we don't have time or whiskey in front of us to talk about that, so we're gonna shelf that for the time being. But by and large, like we saw the writing on the wall that like most efficient way to grow is actually through enterprise folks that are doing high volume of inspections across or services across multiple markets. That's my core focus, right? Over the years, when interest rates jumped up, we, out of necessity, had to survive. And so we started expanding the business into other segments of the real estate transaction, which, as I mentioned, is a far bigger TAM. Again, I didn't have that hindsight going in. I'm not this like oracle that has that vision. I just got lucky, to be candid. But if you think about our business today, like we service customers over that owning operating phase. So we work with property managers is a big segment we do a ton with today. Over the development and retrofitting, we're working with builders up front on infill. We're working with lenders that are helping with like fix and flip and retrofitting of assets. We're working with mortgage servicers. I guess that's the operating phase. We're working with servicers over the life cycle of the loan. We're working with insurance carriers over the life cycle of the policy. And so it's much broader in terms of our customer base now, but it very much encompasses that entire life cycle of residential real estate. One other thing I'll note is we haven't given up on consumer. I think there's so much opportunity that we can do on consumer, but what we've done is we've changed our go-to-market to get consumer. So what we used to do before is I literally spent the first year of my life of Inspectify calling real estate agents and begging them to use Inspectify, beating my head against the wall. I'm like, that's not going to work because I would always lose out to the local inspector. And so what we've started doing over the last year and a half is we've started partnering with that local inspector to help make their business more efficient, more effective, and help run their business. So our bet on consumer is we work with the largest, our biggest, our baddest inspection companies. We give them the entire weight of the Inspectify platform to help them become the market leader in the markets they're in. And in doing so, all that consumer demand is now coming on my platform, and I can create really cool products around that consumer demand to help with the home buying journey. But at essence, my customer is actually the home inspection company, which is an enterprise customer. It's a large customer, right? So it still keeps the same thesis that Inspectify's core customer is enterprise.
We're going to take a break for a word from our sponsor. And when we get back, we're going to dig into the complexity of what Josh just mentioned.
Built Rewards is a payment platform for housing that rewards members in their home and neighborhood. Built is the payment platform for over 5 million units because Built provides incredible value to residents and to property owners and managers that use it. Properties using Built have seen reduced turnover, increased usage of electronic payments, and fewer missed payments. And with our latest resident loyalty program, Built is changing the way that property managers can reward good behavior. Managers can assign rewards and benefits to tenants for a variety of activities like early lease renewal. If you're interested in learning more, go to alliance.builtrewards.com.
Welcome back. We're talking to Josh Jensen, the founder and CEO of Inspectify. And Josh, one of the things that you're talking about here is complexity and the complexity of all the expert opinions, right? So you mentioned earlier, and we all agree, data is the most valuable thing that we can focus on. But I think the second thing that we've seen in this industry, and one of the things that makes it resilient over all the years of it looking the same, as you said, is that experts are, especially in real estate, tend to be pretty resilient. These folks have stayed generally resilient to adopting to new technology, to changing their cost or compensation structure. Like, we can admit, like, this is a resilient group. And one of the things that you're mentioning is like everybody's got to talk to each other, everybody's got to interact, and they have to do it in some form of uniformity and consistency going forward, because that's what the data and the technology demand now. But that wasn't always the case. And so we're shifting them into this new world, as you said, giving them the weight of the platform. I'm just curious, do you see that we're always going to have the same players and they're just going to have better tools? Or are you kind of also implying like, well, we can't all keep doing this the same way, even with better technology, and expect there to be fundamental changes around cost or access or inventory? I'm just curious, how do you see that playing out? This battle between lowering cost and being more efficient, and expertise, and how many people have to be involved?
I would say this, like I might come across as a pessimist that the real estate transaction is never going to change, right? And I actually think it's going to change. And I think the reason why it hasn't changed over the last 15 years is there hasn't been an existential threat to the industry. And what I mean by that is not like a threat to the real estate agent or a threat to the loan officer. I mean, like, just the act of like being a homeowner, like the American dream, right? Think about like when Fly Homes was getting started, like it was solving a very small pain point that was a real pain point, but it's very, very small, which was like traditional home buyers losing out to real estate investors, right? And even though like they grew really quickly, like that was such a tiny problem in the broader of the 5 million transactions they've done. The number of times where like a homeowner got screwed because an investor got the deal because it was probably a fraction of a percent. So the industry is not going to change. Like, why would the entire industry change this model where it's only impacting a fraction of a percent, right? But fast forward to today, like, again, I don't think it's like 95% of the market, but like people just can't afford homes, period, right? Like we saw this like massive increase in home prices because of the pandemic, and we've seen this massive increase in borrowing cost, and we've got this like stalled point, right? And so like I think there is an opportunity for real change to happen in the real estate transaction. I don't know if it's like lowering commission or lowering the mortgage cost or lowering inspection costs. Like in the grand scheme of things, I like think if you add those all up, it's going to unlock a ton of more people to afford homes. But every year it gets worse, to be honest, right? And so I think now we're going to start seeing some pretty compelling ways to change how housing's done in the states to be able to support that. Like I have a good friend of mine that runs a REIT here in Seattle that is converting old hotels into apartments and condos. Like, is that going to be the mass majority? No, it's not. But it creates high. It's one quiver or one arrow in the quiver of ways to solve this. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but like I am definitely more optimistic that we're going to start seeing some fundamental changes. But like I don't think it's just necessarily like commissions going to come down and or cost to close on a home is going to go down. Like you need much more fundamental shifts in the model, because it's breaking, to be candid. And I'm speaking to the choir right here, but like that's kind of my view. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one thing that we said here was, almost a year ago now, probably exactly a year ago, was that, is the commission battle going to be an existential threat? And the answer was no. And now a year later, we can say a resounding no. We were kind of wondering at that time if it would or not, and it's not. And so I think your point about human emotion earlier is very relevant here. What would it take for first-time homebuyers to give up, which is a very strong emotion? And if people start giving up, that is an existential threat because that's powerful. And when you lose hope, then you can really start seeing decisions change dramatically. And so I like where you were headed with it because I think it does paint the right type of picture, which is like, let's not focus on one or two wedges here in the transaction. Let's focus on the fundamentals. And if we start to see those shift, and what should we be looking at to see them shift? But if we do, that's much bigger threat, much bigger threat.
A couple of quick thoughts here. The transaction process itself really starts with the real estate agent. When we had Bob Walters on, he said, look, you need somebody to take somebody to a house, right? It's like you can't do that on a digital platform. Somebody needs to walk you into the home that you're looking to buy. And then that realtor then kind of becomes a quarterback for a lot of the other transactions. Like, here are my three buddies who you can get a loan from. And here's the inspection company I recommend, all the way through to the loan officer. Then that loan officer becomes the quarterback. And that process is really fragmented. And if you did it every year, you'd probably say, shit, this has got to be better. But you do it once every 10 years and you're like, it's just the process and the way it is. And it's hard to change. But I wonder so the first observation is whether or not platforms like Zillow or maybe even Built start to play the role of quarterback. And so something that Jeremy said in the past is like, you have 6 or 7 licensed professionals you use when you buy a house. It's ridiculous. They're all over the place. They're all charging you money for their marketing costs. And if you could somehow get somebody to quarterback that process and shrink it, using like platforms like Inspectify, like, look, here's the quarterback, click here for your inspection, click here for your appraisal, that would make the experience tremendously better. And I think if these digital platforms become ubiquitous enough, that's one way we could see that change. And it's certainly something that I've been thinking about with Built is like, should we rely on the agent to find the inspector? Should we just say, here's a link, click here for an inspection, earn points on it? But then the second comment I'll make too is also AI is starting to creep in. Now it's nowhere near ubiquitous in the real estate process, but the search and other things are happening with AI. We had somebody on, Kristen Messerly, talking about her research on millennials and how many people are now turning to ChatGPT for advice on home buying. And that's another trend that could really change the way that consumers approach the transaction, that breaks them free of the current bonds of like, I'm with this agent, they're going to tell me what to do, and that's what I do.
yeah, I'm gonna probably say a unpopular opinion, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I mean, if I think about the real estate transaction, right, and like the three main folks that play a role in the real estate transaction, and I would say that main folks because of the amount of money that you pay as a home buyer to get that home. It comes down to three people. It's the real estate agent, the loan officer, and the title and escrow firm, right? That's where the three biggest tranche of your money is going, and then the inspectors at the bottom right. If you think about those three, which one, like, what is the one thing you absolutely need to buy a home, especially in this day of age? Like, what is the number one thing that every home buyer, traditional home buyer, needs today to buy a home?
Money.
Money. It's money, right? And so, like, if I think about who is best equipped to be the quarterback, it's the person that has the money. It's that simple, right? Now, like, there's execution, there's strategy, there's so many nuances in there. But like if we're all starting from the goal line, and or not goal line, football analogy, we're all starting from the starting the race, and we're gonna get running. Like, the person that's already probably 50 yards in front of him is the person that has the money, right? Because like you might have the best website for eyeballs. You might have the best website for or best bedside manner to be able to get them comfortable with the home. But in the day, like they're gonna have to go to somebody to get that check because they don't have money to pay for that home, right? And so I think anybody that's providing the capital is in an unfair advantage to start. And my vision is that's probably the person that's going to win. And that doesn't mean the real estate agent's going to go away. I'm not saying that. It means that if I was running a big brokerage, I would find a way to become a mortgage provider as well. Because if you don't, I'm going to lose that customer base to the person that's going to. And there's, large lenders that are acquiring brokerages, and like that's all moving towards that. So yeah, I think fundamentally that's where it's going to go. And I think that is the one thing that AI can't replace. Can you replace all the activities the real estate agent does? I think eventually, yes. Can you replace all the stuff that John Escrow does? For sure. Like, yes, I don't know why that's not done yet. But in the day, like somebody has to provide capital. And like, does that need to be human? No, but it's gonna be an entity that needs to do it. And I think that's where you'll see more consolidation of quarterbacking, to use your analogy, in the coming years, in my opinion.
I think that's consistent, John. If I'm saying this right, you tell me, but that we all agree there probably will be a quarterback. I think none of us think that at least one human quarterback, isn't around at some point in this process for especially first time homebuyers. But then, two, it is a battle to see who that quarterback is, and B, what the embedded tools are that quarterback need to be in the platform where that person actually lives, works, and plays every day to be effective. And once those, one or both of those things evolve, I think we will start to see behavioral shifts really quickly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
One of the behavioral shifts, Josh, that you mentioned earlier was you're starting to see more sellers take an interest in evaluating the property. I want to dig in on that. That's been a personal interest of mine for some time. And I'm curious,
Yeah.
what you're seeing that makes you bullish on that trend, and what do you think that looks like going forward? Well, where do we go from here? How would you predict that changes things, if at all?
Yeah. So, when I started the company 6 years ago, really the only market where you saw sellers doing inspections was San Francisco. Every other market in the country, it was extremely taboo. If you did an inspection up front, like you were the minority of the minority, right? If you look about where we are today, San Francisco is obviously still there. Most of Northwest MLS, most of my backyard, most listings have an inspection on them now. If you look at some of the more busier markets in Texas, DFW, San Antonio, Austin, they also have an inspection on them. So you've got these like massive markets that are starting to move towards that. And really, I think that the core driver has been when a market has gotten really hot and really, really competitive, sellers realize that they could just do the inspection and like almost guarantee that nobody would put an inspection contingency on it, right? I mean, it's that simple. Like, and I wouldn't see sellers. I'm sorry, sellers. I think would get to that point faster. Listing agents have realized that they can just put it on there immediately and like get clean offers through the gate, right? The thing that always blows my mind is like when I go to a real estate a seller's agent, a listing agent, I'm like, why don't we just do an inspection up front? Like the number one piece of feedback I get is like, well, if I do an inspection, I've got to disclose all these issues. And I come up, I'm like, yes, you do. Yes, you do. But then when the buyer does an inspection a month from now, you've lost all lever. You're under purchase and sell, and you've got to either like tell that buyer to go kick rocks or do concessions to make that deal work, right? But you've removed all your leverage. Whereas if you do the inspection up front, you can make repairs, you can market the good and the bad of the property. You actually can spin the argument a bit more, right? It's more within your control. And I think we're seeing more and more markets move towards that, right? Are we ever going to be 100%? No. I don't. I think the industry is way too fragmented. Not in my lifetime, we're going to see 100%. But like, do I get to majority by my lifetime? I think so. I think we're starting to see, especially like your bigger MSAs, higher competitive markets are moving towards that direction. And in the day, it just creates like, I think the most efficient real estate transaction is one where everything's disclosed up front, just like how every other shopping experience is done.
100%. Something that Jeremy and I talk about all the time is just how strange it, like I don't go put a painting on an auction and say it's a Picasso without somebody validating it before somebody bids on it. And that, that's what we do in real estate. It's amazing. So this is kind of a strange question, but I'm curious because as I think about it, Josh, you probably hold more digital inspection data than anybody has ever sort of consolidated and held in one place, which I think allows you to generate some really interesting insights. So maybe a kind of an obvious question. What's like the number one thing that inspections uncover? Like as you sort of consolidate that data, are there like very clear trends that you see across all inspections?
So the funny one I'll say is the most common defect that's pointed out, and there's some local dependency on this as well, but I think the last time I checked is missing seismic straps on a water heater.
Yeah. Interesting.
I don't know. I mean, like, I can tell you why. It's because it's a really obvious one to point out, and it's a really good way for an inspector to say, "I saved you." Like, "Oh, that could have been a big deal," but, like,
Right.
it's really easy to find out, right? But that is by far the most common deficiency that we've seen on our inspection reports, across the bit. I think the interesting thing that we have learned, I'll speak in a couple different ways. One, when I started to Inspectify, one of the core problems I was trying to solve is before Inspectify, if you inspected the same home 5 times with 5 different inspectors, you would get 5 completely different reports. Not only in, like, fit and form, but in terms of what they would call out. And if my core customer is enterprise, like, I can't survive on that. I need to be able to give consistency and uniformity to my end customer. And so a lot of what we built over the last 5 years is like, how can I create a experience where if I inspect the same home 5 times with 5 different inspectors, I generally get one view of that property from it, right? I think a lot of that is around expectations and training of the supply that's doing the job, right? Like, who's doing the inspection? Inspectors are amazing. They have one of the hardest jobs out there. They are expected to walk into a home and follow a blueprint as if every home looks the same. But we all know that it's the most heterogeneous asset class in the world by far, and it's really hard to, like, go and create consistency in there, right? But our way of doing it is normalizing what the issues are down to a baked list of things, right? Like, over the last, to your point, Jonathan, like, we've done a ton of inspections, and we boiled it down that there's around 1,600 things that can go wrong with a home, generally, right? And inspectors, for good or bad, are kind of forced to use that logic when they're rating and assigning homes, and allows us to create a lot more consistency around the data. In terms of, like, other trends we're seeing, there's general interesting things around, like, when the home is built, which, like, we're getting to a point where we can start creating some studies around this, but, like, housing stock in the 90s compared to the 80s compared to the 70s, like, if you kind of normalize just, like, age of the systems, like, they're different quality levels, right? And you kind of follow when, like, code was put into place. So, like, there's a lot you can know about a home based upon, like, the age it was built and how much of it's been improved since it was built, right? Based upon the standards of it. So yeah, I mean, we're still, I'd say, still early on. We're not, like, we do about 1% of all consumer inspections in the country right now. So, like, we're still small, but it's a single digit. I'll take that. That's a big win for me. But I think there's a lot more.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Like, I keep thinking about, like, with the data you have, like, AI can really instruct an inspector to look at things, based on, like, the things that are most likely to be wrong with a given home in a given area in a given year of build. Like, is that kinda how you're thinking about really, like, educating and getting inspectors to be way more, and not just consistent, but just more accurate in terms of their assessment of the property?
Yeah, what we're doing right now is, and this isn't full home inspections. Full home inspections are probably the hardest one to solve with AI. But as I mentioned, that's by far the smallest addressable market. Like, most of it's these other types of inspections, which are typically lighter in nature and more surface level in terms of what they're trying to identify. And what we've been able to do in the last, honestly, it's been the last, like, 3 months, is, like, a lot of that workflow we can automate with AI, right? Like, give an example. Like, if you are an insurance carrier, you just really care if there's granular loss missing on the shingles, right? Do I need a licensed inspector to tell me that? Absolutely not. I've got hundreds of millions of photos of asphalt shingles with granular loss. Like, that is a very simple model to deploy, right? So, like, I think the first stage is, like, how can I help inspectors be really efficient on site? And it doesn't mean I'm going to pay them less to do more work. Like, I'm going to pay them based upon the work they're doing on site, and they can do more work every day, right? And we can be really efficient around that. But a lot of that work, I'll be more tailored to your question in a second, but a lot of that work now is kind of post process. Inspectors in the field captures the data we need. We do our underwriting afterwards, and then we create a final product. What we're moving to, hopefully by end of year, is we'll start to guide the inspector based upon what our AI is seeing, which I think is the point you're making, which is there's some, like, I want to call it AI, just like machine learning, where you look for correlative factors. Like, the one I always tell folks, and we have this in our software today, is like, if you have a tanked water heater and the house has galvanized plumbing, that water heater's expected life is probably a tenth of what the manufacturer says, because galvanized plumbing will wreck it. I've seen over and over. The data is, like, statistical significance. I can predict that very closely, right? But what gets more advanced is like instead of the inspector having to like, if you think about like their workflow today, like an inspector, because they have such a hard job, they are looking for visual cues for them to go deeper. They don't have time. An inspector does not have time in a 3 hour window to inspect every single thing in your house. That would take days to do that. So what a typical inspector is doing is they're looking for visual cues and they're doing their own tacit knowledge and analysis in their brain saying, hey, when I've seen this cue before, I know to dig deeper here, right? We now can systemize that and make it programmatic that when we see that visual cue, we can now prompt the inspector real time in the field to dig deeper, to say, hey, capture this, check this. This is what we're thinking going on. And what that's going to allow us to do is one, make the inspector significantly more efficient so they can do more inspections per day, probably be far more competitive on price to customers. But more importantly, we can create a very more consistent output than we've ever done before, because every single inspector will be doing things like in a consistent manner, and the data set will be predictably computing that in the same way as well. And eventually, where I think this will go to, and I don't think full home inspections for the home purchase is where this is going to cannibalize this ever. But like, if I can build that technology going back to like the home management component, and I can give that to a homeowner to say like, when you have a problem or once a year, go do these 5 things, and I can tell you exactly what to do and make an easy button to get it done. Like there's a huge opportunity there, right? Like the more and more I can create easy ways for self-reported data on homes, like the better, right? And so like that's where I think the real unlock is going to be with what we're developing on the AI side.
Phenomenal.
Josh, thank you for your time. I always leave smarter every time we talk. I always leave smarter than I was when I joined, and now we get to share that with everybody through this episode. We like to do one rapid fire hot seat question at the very end
Oh man.
that we ask every guest, and that is, if you weren't working on this, or if you were advising a wannabe founder who listens to this podcast, what's the innovation or the problem that you would work on or that you would recommend that you wish existed? What's the business or the innovation that you wish existed that you're saying somebody should be working on this?
Honestly, I think the hardest problem to solve in housing is contractors by far. And again, I path of least resistance. I didn't choose that path because it's really, really hard. And like I didn't mention when I started when I was at Fly Homes, I ran their GC. So I like lived this pain point day in, day out. But like it is such a massive pain point. And most of the solutions I'm seeing today are more ways to make the bigger guys and gals be more profitable and not solving this like key pain point, which is like it's hard to get reliable contractor at a fair price. Like here's I'm sorry, this is not rapid fire, but like you just open Pandora's box. Like here's the reason why contracting pricing is so difficult. Like, and you told me before that this is rated explicit, so I can get explicit, right?
Yes, sir.
There is no fucking standardized pricing for repairs at all, right? And so when you have like I do this every month in my developments, I'll have 3 contractors come out and I'll get like a 30 to 100% swing of pricing between the 3 of them.
Incredible.
And the reason is it's not because they're not looking at the different data. They're all looking at the same data, but they're doing a very, very simple calculus. I'm busy. What's the fuck you price just to give to this homeowner to make them go away? And if they take it, I will find a way to do it. And you don't know that as a homeowner. So you're just like, God, I just got to get this done. And then it creates this really, really bad experience, right? So it is nasty. It's fragmented, like infinitely times more fragmented than inspections by far. But it is such a bigger addressable market and such a massive pain point that, man, if someone was solving that, it'd make my life a lot easier, both professionally running in a diligence platform, but also personally as a homeowner. It's where the current solutions aren't working and you need a fundamental change.
Here, here.
I mean, again, I just like the idea of inspections being digitized. It's such a good place to point, such a huge pain point that like everybody knows. I love that answer, Josh. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time. Like Jeremy said, always leave the conversation smarter. Always enjoy talking to you. Best of luck as you continue to build out Inspectify.
Really appreciate you guys. Had a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. We would love to hear from you listeners. Please send us an email at podcast@thehousing-insiders, or you have comments on this episode, or if you want to hear something new, or if you have an idea for another guest. Also, please leave us a review.
Hit subscribe for more episodes in your feed. And as always, thank you, Keenan Chen, for our music.